Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Things That Matter with me, Martie McNabb. So, if you've been listening or watching over a time, you know that the first part is I always end up talking about how I met my guest. And so, our guest today, Ted Cragg, I ended up meeting you've also heard, I've had several guests on from Location Indie, and not specifically that Ted was a member of that online community, but he did attend Camp Indie, which was the adult camp for location independent people who are have unconventional lives, are trying to figure things out, maybe start a business, maybe want to be a remote worker, maybe travel, usually are multi-potentialites, like doing lots of things, have many, many ideas, and can't keep up with them. That's the
Yeah.
usual thing. So that's how I met Ted originally, but then we ended up connecting and getting a little closer last August when we met in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the Everything Conference. And that's
Mhm.
when I got to know Ted a bit more and just connected really, really well. And then later in August, I was actually up in Montreal for an event at the old school. Which is pro-aging, anti-ageist work. And I realized I wasn't that far from Ted and
Yeah.
that it was a different way to come home from Canada. So I ended up taking Brooklyn, my little camper van, traveling across a little further east to meet up with Ted, and we got a chance to chat and hang out while it was raining a little bit.
That's
And
right.
yeah, so and then we've connected since then, and I've been lucky enough to been invited on Ted's podcast as well.
Yeah.
And now this is my opportunity to interview Ted here on Things That Matter. So before further ado, I am going to turn it over to Ted for as you know, the show and tell section of our this episode. Take it away, Ted.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for months at least. I've always loved the concept of your show. It's fun to talk about on my show there, the Multipod, and how, it's always really spoken to me, that theme, that idea that, we take otherwise ostensibly kind of just generic run of the mill things, and turn them into things we associate with memories and people and stuff like that. It's a really neat concept. So that I suppose you could say the challenge in me coming here today was, well, what am I going to share? What could I find? There's all kinds of things I could pick in a sense. I had a feeling it would probably be related back to travel because travel has been such a huge part of my life for decades, really. And I have this little box of all kinds of trinkets and odds and ends and pins and ticket stubs, and all kinds of things I've saved over the years. And I was going through that this week to try to find some stuff. And I remembered I have a collection of library cards, which is probably like most collections. I didn't set out to collect library cards. They just kept accumulating. And there was a point, though, because you'll see here, of course, in a couple minutes, that I have library cards from all around the world, from all the various different places, because I would usually make a point when I was staying in a place, even if it was only for like 2 or 3 weeks, to try to get a library card so I could use the library, of course. Often it was for the internet, sometimes to take out a book. But yeah, so before I knew it, now we're talking kind of 10, 15 years ago in most of the cases here. But before I knew it, I was like had a pretty substantial collection of library cards, which then, okay, at that point, again, quite a while ago, I really made the point to keep them because I could have said, well, I'm never going back to such and such a place again. What's the point in keeping this library card? But I quickly realized that there's a collection growing here of something fairly unique and special, right? Because it really reflects the places that I've lived and having kind of made at least some effort to settle down in that place again, even if it was only for a short time. But to get a library card, that implies you want to feel some sense of home in that place that you're staying. You don't just get a library card if you're staying in a place for like 2 days, right? So yeah, there's a bit of deeper meaning, I suppose, to it as a result. As far as collections go, I don't really collect a lot of things. It comes back to the whole thing is like, I appreciate stuff, but I really like to live as simply and modestly as possible. But this one is an exception. So we might as well show you what I got, because like there's a lot here. I don't know if we'll get through them all, but there's one exception, I guess, in the fact that the rest of these are all library cards. Yeah, except I did find the very first membership that I ever had to anything. You can see the name. This was a movie rental, video rental store in Peterborough, Ontario, where I grew up, and it's called Ted's Place. You don't see Ted around really as a name all that often. So the fact that a place was called Ted's Place, right? And this is the very first, before a driver's license or any kind of membership in anything. This is like the first membership card I ever had, kind of just for the sake of it. I may have rented like 2 movies there, but it was fun. So it really speaks to where I grew up is this one here. This is the Peterborough Public Library. So it's a wonderful library. It's still going quite strong. This kind of connected to a network all around the province and so on. You can get online audiobooks, and they're really good about sharing that kind of stuff. So this reminds me of growing up now, of course, in Peterborough, and I lived there till I was about 20, let me think, 24. 24 is when I left Peterborough. I still go back a fair bit. In fact, I was just there this past weekend, but usually it's only a couple times a year. When I was in Peterborough, though, this is a good point, is that I went to university there too, not just growing up in high school, but there's a university in town, so I went there too. So you can imagine after a couple years of doing that, I would have been 20, it was 2003, I was coming up on 22 years old, and I needed to get out. Like, I needed a break, a change of scene, I wanted to travel, I just needed a change. So I took a year off, I got a UK work permit, and went to England mostly. Traveled around a bit. I ended up settling in the town of Bournemouth on the south coast of England, kind of the southwest coast. So this is my library card from Bournemouth. I spent a lot of time there. This is, again, 2003, so early internet days. I did a lot of travel planning research there. Skip ahead then. I finished university, and as soon as I finished, I'll always remember, I've told this story, I think, a few times in various places, but like the last day of my last exam, I came home, opened an atlas of Canada. I knew I wanted to stay in Canada and just figure out, where am I going to go first? Where am I going to go to live? Not just to travel like for a week or two. I wanted to go live somewhere. And it boiled down to either Montreal or Halifax. And my brother was in Halifax at the time in Nova Scotia. He was at university there. He's a couple years younger. So, I thought, well, why not go to Halifax and spend some time there. I'd been there a couple times, but I wanted to live there. It's the whole point. I wanted to really live in a place. So I moved to Halifax. There's my Halifax library card. I use that, and I also use my brother's. I don't have his library card. I should, because I used to use that a lot to, again, bum some internet at the time. I stayed in Halifax for maybe 3 or 4 months or so, and there wasn't too much happening, really. I didn't want to make a longer commitment, so I wanted to see more of Canada, and I wanted to go out west. And kind of fast forward a few months, I ended up on Vancouver Island in a little town called Nanaimo. I wasn't there for very long, but I did get a library card from there. And then fast forward from there, I was heading back to, I'll see a lot of these, like, they're library cards, and I get them. But again, fairly short stops. So I had a job lined up in the summer of 2007, which would have started in April, and I had about 4 months, 3.5 months to kill. So I went to Edmonton in northern Alberta, which especially at the time was really quite booming. It's easy to get jobs. There's, they pay pretty well and all that kind of stuff. So I moved to Edmonton, and this is my Edmonton library card here. I only stayed there, again, for like 3 months. I've only been back once since, but, reminder of the places that we've been. And I got one more here from Canada. So this fast forward now a couple years, and I wanted to live in Vancouver. This was coming up in 2009. I wanted to be there for the Winter Olympics, which are coming in February 2010. So I moved there a year ahead of time. I wanted to be a tour guide and really get to know the city, which I did. I got a great job with a wonderful local tour company. And a friend of mine, we got an apartment in Burnaby, which is the city right next to Vancouver. It's all basically one big city. So this is my Burnaby library card. Reminds me of living there. This is one of my longer stops, really, aside from my life the past 10 years. But out of my whole traveling life, we were in Burnaby for almost a year and a half, I guess, in the end. So when I was in Vancouver, though, I remember thinking, well, if I don't go to Australia soon, I'm never going to make it and be able to get a work permit, because I was coming up on 30 years old at that point. And I remember sitting in traffic in Vancouver, doing a tour, trying to think of things to say as we were stuck in traffic. It's like, I don't want to keep doing this for another few years. Like, if I want to go to Australia, I got to do it. So it took a while to save the money and make all the plans and everything. But in March 2011, I flew to Sydney from Vancouver and stayed. I never intended to stay in Sydney. I stayed there for about a week or so, traveled around a bit. I ended up in Melbourne. Melbourne remains one of my favorite cities in the world. It's a really, really neat city. There's all kinds of interesting little neighborhoods. There's lots of culture, multicultural. There's tons of arts, there's tons of sports, it's right on the ocean. Really neat place. I tried to stay there, so I got a library card. And I was really trying to find work there. There's a lot of backpackers. This was back in 2011 now, so I was probably the same. There were a lot of backpackers that would go through Melbourne, and the locals were a little hesitant to hire people, of course, who would probably take off after a few weeks. So it was hard to find a job there. I stuck around for maybe 4 weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks, and then traveled, saw some more of Australia. I ended up in Perth on the west coast and found a room in a flat with a guy in Fremantle. Fremantle is the port city of Perth. Perth's a little bit inland. It's all, again, basically one big city, but Fremantle is technically a separate city right on the ocean. Beautiful place to live. I got a job delivering groceries from a local grocery store. So I'd show up every day and load my little refrigerator cube truck and drive around. They gave me a GPS, so I knew where to go. It's a great way to see the city and really learn and get off the tourist path. Meet lots of locals. You'd show up at their door and, bring their groceries in. And this is all quite novel back in 2011. They do it all the time now. But I live in Fremantle, It's another one of all these places that I consider home. It was very much home. I was there for about 5 months. So, of course, my Fremantle library card, spent some quality time there, which kind of brings us up to near the end here, because the last two that I found were I did a French immersion course. It was only 3 weeks, but let me think, that would have been January of 2013. Yeah, after my wife and we came back from our big round the world trip there, Australia and Asia and India and so on. She's from Quebec, and I was going to settle there. I knew a little bit of French from my school days, but I couldn't really converse. I didn't understand a lot. So she was working, and I purposely took 3 weeks on my own. I needed to learn how to be kind of self-sufficient, right, and independent in French. So at least to get kind of a head start, I went off to the University of Chicoutimi, which is north of Quebec City. It's well known for their immersion program. People of all different ages come from around the country and even the States too. So, I had a University Quebec at Chicoutimi library card. Fun. It was only 3 weeks I was there, but yeah, it really helped. It really helped get that foundation in French. And that kind of brings us up to now. Now, I'm missing the library card that we had for the past 8 years when we were living near Ottawa. And, we had library cards there too. I'm not sure where that one ended up, but I may have kind of forgot about all this by that point. But I do have my current library card, so this is good. It brings it back to the current day, and I do still have a library card. I guess we'll see how long this one lasts. In our little town here, which is pretty small, a couple thousand people or so, is a really nice little library. It's really well done for the size of our town. They've got some programming, and it's just around the corner, so we go there all the time. So it's a fun way to kind of trace the history, and through library cards. It's such a peculiar thing. It just kind of evolves, right, naturally over time.
What an amazing story. And I love like your life and travel through library cards.
Yeah.
It's like, and I'm fascinated. I didn't do it when you grew up. Did you go to libraries when you were young?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, all the time.
So I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. I moved so many times with my family that we didn't end up doing the
Mm.
library. I like in Vermont, there's a local library, and I see moms and dads bringing their kids in. It's
Yeah.
like, becomes a routine, a habit and stuff. And I
Mm.
didn't get that so much. I did get a few library cards, but I love that you said it's like, oh, mostly about internet access and
Well, this is interesting now. I think about it. If I was to do that again, I mean, I don't know. If I was, say, that age or whatever, backpacking again, would I still be getting library cards? Because, of course, I'd have a laptop or smartphone or whatever. I wouldn't need it for the internet.
right.
Would I still get library cards just for the experience, for the collection? I don't know. But I'm glad that maybe I was traveling at the time I did, because, yeah, I spent a
Yeah.
lot of time with those computers.
Yeah, and so it's a neat collection of
Mm.
that that you wouldn't, I've never had anybody bring a library card or a collection of library cards to my events that I've hosted over like 400 of them,
Yeah.
in person and virtually. And I've never had anybody on my show bring a library, library cards.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's fascinating. Can you do me one favor before I ask
Hmm.
the follow-up question? And that's take all of them and hold them
Yes.
in front of the camera so we can see this collection. This,
Yes.
and
Let me
of
get the
course,
one on the right
I'm
side here.
looking at the other collections behind you, the paintings, and you've got
Yeah.
things.
There's a
I
lot of stuff here.
know.
They
even
do all have
even though
stories
you're
for sure. All
yes.
right. I think this will work. Whoop.
Okay. Whoop.
So I kind of fan them out here. So I'll move my fingers a bit. Yeah.
Yes,
So
that's perfect.
there they are. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Starting from when I was probably 15 there, the yellow one
I
at the
know.
video store.
Ted, your name, the video
Yeah.
store. And I also saw on one of the library cards, it said Kevin.
Oh, yeah. I might even not have told you that. So I have many names. My first name's Kevin. We'll get on the record now. I've
Okay.
always gone by Ted,
Okay.
um, which is my middle name. Edward's my middle name. Ted comes from Edward in my case.
Yeah.
So this was another whole thing with travel, especially like roughly 20 years ago, as like security and stuff was getting tighter. And I really had to make sure all my ID was correct because there was a time my passport must have been my full name for sure, but my driver's license or something, my credit cards definitely were Ted. They would always say Ted. They didn't say Kevin. Once I was in Seattle, when I was in Vancouver Island there, I went down to Seattle. I was on my way back. It was kind of late at night. I stayed in a motel just instead of going back to Vancouver. So I went to check in and I go to pay. Well, asked for ID, fine, and then pay with credit card. Of course, my credit card, Ted, did not match with my ID, Kevin. They wouldn't let me pay. I had to go find an ATM, like whatever, a mile down the road to get some cash to pay for the motel room. So that
Wow.
was a sign. Okay, it's time to like make sure everything's synchronized. So there are some people watching, Camp Indy. Let's say the people who register, do the check-in for Camp Indy, or who
Yes.
I pay bills to. They will know that my first name is Kevin because it has to be. But I've always gone by Ted. My grandfather was Ted, and so I'm named
Oh,
after him. And there's another
oh,
cousin, like the middle generation, who lives in Vancouver. There, he goes by Ted. We're all Edwards, so it's a name that's gone through the family.
family.
Yeah, and
Wonderful.
Kevin's also my mom's father, my other grandfather's name. But
Oh,
I don't know. They lived in Ottawa, and we grew up in Peterborough. Maybe if I'd grown up in Ottawa, I would have been more Kevin. Who knows?
that's interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I caught that. I was like, that's interesting. I have to ask him that before I ask them. The one usual
Yeah.
follow-up question, and that is, um, I talk about legacy, and needless to say, these are things that we surround ourselves with, adorn ourselves with, the things we keep,
Mm.
the things that matter, and the things that we'll leave behind. And so, have you considered at all what you would like to have happen with this collection that you didn't expect to get, but
Yeah.
to collect when you're dead and gone?
Mm. Well, I haven't thought about it. I haven't even thought about these cards really for probably at least 3 years because we moved 3 years ago, so that was a chance to kind of go through all the stuff. But regardless, it's not something I think about on any kind of regular basis. The fact to have these library cards, so that in itself, if I was to kind of hope that my kids were to keep them, they'd have to know the stories behind them. But that's fine. It's a great way to reason to tell them those stories. So for that reason, they might keep them. But my thing when it comes to stuff is this: don't keep anything that you don't feel you want to keep. That doesn't bother me at all. Granted, there might be some old family heirlooms or something, but it would take a lot to really choose a thing that I would expect or hope that, basically my kids or someone else would keep because I'm so conscious of, in essence, the burden of stuff. My instinct is to reject having stuff. I hate having stuff. But therefore, as we've talked about in the past, I value so much more the stuff that I do have. So therefore, with these cards, if my kids, let's say, value them and the story and the connection, and it helps them trace, my journey over, I guess, the better part of 20 years, right? That's great. And obviously they're small, they can keep them. But if they don't want to, that doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, I've always said the things that I have need to, because I live, as you know, part-time in Albuquerque with my wife and mother-in-law,
Hmm.
part-time in Vermont with my mom and part-time on the road in a camper van. So my
Yeah.
things have to have a purpose or a story, and ideally both.
Yeah.
That's what is important to me. And as you said, yes, they're not, if people if if people don't share the stories of the
Hmm.
things. Not that I think things matter, obviously, even though I
Yeah.
my show is called Things That Matter. It's not that the things that matter, it's the stories that get attached to these that do.
Yeah.
And that's like you said, here's your timeline. This is your road trip. This is your,
Hmm.
life and travel, told through these library cards. So that's
Yeah.
why it matters, and making sure that whoever is left behind knows those stories are is the most important thing. So, and if they
Hmm.
know the stories, then at least they keep the stories. They don't have to leave. They don't have to keep
Yeah.
the stuff.
Yeah.
So, and they can even
Hmm.
create a book or create a collage, or there's lots of things they can do with it without actually having the physical things too. So there's all
Yeah.
creative aspects that they can do with these things that
Hmm.
they could do just like the fan that you did and take a picture of it and, have a little
Hmm.
QR code that has your voice, your video sharing the stories of this. Or I
Hmm.
this episode itself could
Yeah. I'll
you
just
could
show them this
share with
episode.
them, right? So anyway, there's just all kinds of ways. So needless to say, that was a fascinating tale
Yeah.
story told through library cards. And so now I would like to, we've talked about your podcast, we've talked about a few other things and how I met you and all of that kind of stuff. But now I
Hmm.
want to give you a chance to let my watchers and listeners know a little bit more about the work that you do and how they can find out more and connect with you. So,
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It's we have very a similar approach to our podcast, which I think is wonderful because it helps to spread the word. In the sense that when people come on my show, the Multipod, there's very much an intention to it in that I want to connect the guests with the listeners. So and whether it's business related or just a new project or a hobby or passion, if there's something the guest says that speaks to the listener, I encourage the listeners to reach out. It's nice being in the guest seat here because I can do that. That's fun. I'm a podcast producer, so I've been doing this now as we're talking here, better part of 4 years now. Yeah. So, starting off very much just audio, doing a lot more video lately. I kind of work with pretty much all kinds of different topics, which is one of the reasons I love it because no two shows are the same. And, I've been able and lucky to work with some travel shows and some finance shows. I've got a lawyer has an interesting practice in Virginia. I've been doing a music one now, a trumpet podcast, which that's fun, that's different. So I love the variety of it. And what I've really learned more than anything is that it comes down to the relationship that I would have with the client, with the person who's doing the project. And because there's a lot of communication that has to be involved, there's the trust issue. They're trusting someone with the production basically of their show. There's you have to have a good rapport. So more than like the topic or kind of niching down, as they say, in terms of a certain industry or topic subject material, it's really, you could say, maybe even niching down to a personality. Like it's the people that I want to work with. So if ever I'm have a call and discovery call and all that, I'm really kind of just keeping a sense for, well, is this someone that I'm going to enjoy working with? We're going to have a good relationship, be able to communicate, go back and forth, whatever the scope of it is. Some projects I just do the audio editing and it takes whatever it is, an hour or something, turn it around, send it back, and it's done. That's great. If I did that all the time, I'd get kind of bored. So I love having projects where I'm much more involved. There's some coaching, there's some direction. We talk about strategy, who's your audience, what are your objectives, do you have a business, or you have plans to monetize, and all that kind of stuff. I love doing that, but I wouldn't want to do that all the time because then that would be just like exhausting. So I like having the balance between the two. You kind of switch back and forth through different projects. So at the end of the day, I really become passionate about helping people find their purpose and be able to sustain their podcast and do it in a way that works for them. It could be a seasonal thing. It could be a regular production for sure. But whatever it is that helps you enjoy the process, it's a lot of work, of course. It's a big commitment, but it's a wonderful thing to do. And it's such a neat platform, as you know really well. Like there's really nothing else that compares. I mean, we get to be in people's ears, or we get to be on their screens, and they give us that time, and you just don't have that connection in other mediums. It's not your 45-second social media little clip, right? There's much more deeper, interesting stuff like we have the time to chat about today. So that's why I love it. It's a really neat platform and medium.
Okay. Yes. Yes, it is. It is. You remind me, we've talked about this before about, how, um, what an honor it is to
Yeah.
be welcomed into people's, lives through this platform.
Mm.
And yes, Ted and I have skirted around talking about him helping me with a few
Yes.
other things. This is a very low budget production at this point, and it may stay pretty much that way. But it's always good to improve and to
Yeah.
and to have a plan for the future.
Mm.
So please tell my audience like where they can find you
Yeah.
now. This is what, and it all will all be in the show notes, of course. But here's
Good.
your opportunity to tell them verbally and on camera.
Okay. Yeah. So I launched a production company. It's called Quick Edit Podcasts, quickeditpodcasts.com. And it's designed in the sense that if you just have kind of a one-off episode or a fairly last-minute thing, you can submit that and send me the files and everything and turn it around in 48 hours. So you don't have a big commitment you have to make and contracts and all that kind of stuff. It's set up that way. Now, the reality is that that helps me get to know people and kind of get people through the door and so on and make those connections. And then if projects evolve to something more substantial or a longer commitment, then great. But there's no obligation, there's no expectation that it's anything like it. Really comes back to variety, multi-potentiality, that I love just doing different projects, and our brain is able to adapt, I think, and, not be intimidated by starting something brand new with like a brand new person. Like, that's cool. I really like having that variety. So Quick Edit Podcast, where you can find me. Social media, I don't do too much yet. It's on the list, but LinkedIn, if there's anything, I do try to post stuff on LinkedIn and talk about podcasting. So just search for my name there. You'll find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ted, for joining me for this episode of Things That Matter. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And I encourage you to think about the things that you surround yourself with, and the stories that they would tell. And make sure my encouragement, strong encouragement, is that you share your stories,
Mm.
because I deeply believe that it's our stories that have a way to connect, build community, uh, reduce isolation and loneliness,
Yeah.
and just have the chance, the opportunity to change the world.
Mm.
So in their little ways. So thanks again, Ted. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to staying in touch. Thanks,
Absolutely.
thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.